Hey guys, today we're going to be talking about why I don't buy seafood. And seafood is highly nutritious, actually, from sea moss to whale blubber, and also aquatic stuff that grows in fresh water. And that's not the case that we're making here today. The reason that I don't buy seafood has much more to do with the market and the way that we collect and distribute these products. So let's go ahead and get into it. The most consumed seafood product in the world is shrimp.
Lemon shrimp, coconut shrimp.
And the American market accounts for 92% of that.
Shrimp gumbo, pineapple shrimp, pepper shrimp.
Now, most of that shrimp is farmed. The wild-caught shrimp market has declined dramatically by 98.8%, which is huge, obviously. Now, I actually have a problem with both the shrimp fishing industry and the shrimp farming industry.
I know everything there is to know about the shrimping business.
But I'm going to cover shrimp fishing first because I do believe that this is what most people think of how their shrimp is actually getting to them.
You ever been on a real shrimp boat?
And how their shrimp is actually caught. And actually, I think most people, their idea of shrimp farming comes from Forrest Gump.
Shrimping was easy.
And it's really not that fair to compare it to that movie, because that movie is showing you bycatch like he's catching toilet seats and soldiers' hats.
Still no shrimp, Lieutenant Dan.
Meanwhile, up to 98% of what's actually caught on shrimp boats in the shrimp industry is bycatch. And bycatch basically means anything that's shrimp size or above that gets caught in the net. And you could imagine that the smaller the animal gets that they're fishing for, the smaller the net they have to use, and the more likely they are to get a higher bycatch. Now, worldwide, the bycatch rate is about 50% when you even it all out, but shrimp is a particularly bad industry for this, meaning again that much more of what is caught is not intended. It's not the intended purpose of their fishing venture, meaning they're not going to take the dolphins back, they're not going to take the red snapper back, they're there for shrimp, everything else goes back overboard. Maybe they take a little bit home for their families, but it's a huge wasteful industry, and it really is stripping a lot of our ocean bare. You know, these bottom trawlers especially, they're catching lots of stuff and they're destroying the ecosystem at the same time.
What you do is you just drag your nets along the bottom.
Obviously, ecosystems can regenerate. We are just putting way too much pressure on a lot of these, and this is why we have switched to farming. This is one of the reasons why we have switched to farming. As we overfish, it becomes harder to catch the fish that we're after, and this is the case in shrimp, and this is also the case in many other popular fish products like halibut, for instance. So they say there's about 1 billion pounds of shrimp eaten every year in America.
You can barbecue it, boil it, broil it, bake it, saute it.
And since they account for 92% of the shrimp market, it's fair to say it's just over 1 billion pounds consumed worldwide, but they say that over 5 billion pounds are produced every single year for world consumption, and I don't know if they're lumping in fishing along with farming, although of course farming has taken the far majority. So by my math, that 1 billion out of 5 billion produced means that only 20% is actually being consumed, which itself is a very wasteful figure. In perspective, it's estimated that only roughly 50% of everything that we farm, especially in the Western world, only 50% of that actually makes it to market. And then once at market, another 50% spoils or goes unsold or is otherwise unaccounted for. And I included that UN number that 1/3 of food produced around the world is wasted, and that's just because that's the more commonly touted number, but there's many cases to be made that the number is closer to 50%, and then once at market, there's another 50% loss. And since shrimp has the highest bycatch rate and discard rate in the industry, it's worth taking a look at some of these numbers. So you can see that there's not much of a difference between what was considered bycatch and then what was actually discarded, meaning some of the fishermen or families did receive some of those fish for their personal use, and maybe even some of that found its way into small markets. Interestingly, we tend to think of some of the most major problems in the fishing industry as occurring in Asia, and although that is true, and we will talk about that, China claims that it keeps and uses most of its bycatch for its aquaculture industry and for human consumption. So it is interesting that actually a lot of the problems in the bycatch area is actually happening in the Northwest Pacific and a lot of areas that we would consider part of the civilized world. And if I was to make any suggestions on how to reduce the waste of the fishing industry, especially the shrimp fishing industry, it would definitely be to make use of all those extra products, right? Have fish markets that have the huge variety of things available that we do catch in these nets. Most of them are edible, but making them available, animal feeds like they mentioned in aquaculture, at least there's some recycling going on because these are massive numbers. We're talking millions and billions of tons of animals, of fish, sea mammals, seals, whales, dolphins, turtles, eels, big fish, small fish, all kinds of things. So let's move on to fish farming and shrimp farming. And the main problem with this that most people have is not the essence of farming fish itself. In theory, it can be done well and it can be done cleanly and give us a nice product at the end. But in reality, the product that we get from shrimp farming is what most people would consider gross, to put it bluntly. They're mistreated animals, they are living in their own filth, they're improperly filtered, they're being fed all kinds of waste, and again, so it's just bad conditions. And they're saying that roughly 75 to 80% of the production is coming from Asia, and most of that is coming from Thailand. And generally, this is being done in countries with very little regulations anyways. And why this exists is because we're demanding a cheap seafood product. Essentially, the low cost of shrimp and the high consumption of shrimp justifies the cutting of corners in these low budget countries, low budget production. And so they're selling us a pretty inferior quality product, and no matter which way you slice it, there's waste involved, both with the farming and with the actual fishing. So it seems that there's a situation with shrimp that we really just can't win unless we step it up and we produce farmed shrimp on a much greater quality scale, meaning they're going to need more room, they're going to need better filtration, they're going to need better feeds, they're going to need enough room to live and thrive without antibiotics and other pesticide-like things that we put in the water to kill microbes and such. And of course, we've seen this problem in cows and chickens. This is what a big part of the organic food movement is about. So one suggestion here would definitely be to move towards the organic shrimp production market, organic shrimp farming concept, because this is our biggest thing that we consume from the sea. And by the way, since shrimp is at the second level of the food chain there, and it is a zooplankton essentially, that means it has a super high nutritional value for us. So this could actually be a wicked superfood. These are sea bugs essentially, sea insects essentially, and insects themselves again are highly nutritious. They're at that second level where they're consuming the plant material of the ocean, and that is giving them a super concentrated dose of nutrients without the problems of bioaccumulation, biomagnification, and things like mercury, right? The tuna is going to have a ton of mercury in it because there's a little bit of that mercury at every level in the sea, and each level you go up in the food chain, it concentrates by 10 times biomagnification. So you end up with more of the bad stuff in the big animals, the big long-lived animals as well. And of course, shrimp are small, short-lived, and very nutritionally dense for what we do get. So the difference in quality of product that you can get between a farm fish or a shrimp or wild caught can be tremendous. And this is actually even better illustrated in salmon meat. A lot of people go towards the wild, and of course there's going to be a bycatch problem in the salmon industry, just like in any fishing industry. But the difference between the meat quality is evident visually, it's evident by tasting it, and the color of a farmed salmon meat can often be so distasteful that the industry will dye them to make them look like they are nice, juicy, wild meats. In our world, in our business, we subscribe to the 12 bad food lists prescribed by Dr. Glidden as foods to avoid. So this also means that finding a fish dish in a restaurant that is not prepared with oil or it's gluten, breaded in some way, is very, very difficult to find. You're left with some pretty bland options, mostly in the sashimi and obviously the non-deep fried sushi. But of course, you have to be aware of the sources. Even further, it's very unlikely that the tuna used at a sushi restaurant, or even in a can for that matter, is going to be real tuna. It's basically a 0% chance that the crab is going to be real crab. It's going to be, crab meal. And by the same token, you buying lobster, it's probably not even going to be real lobster, especially if it's at a fast food fish restaurant chain of any kind. But honestly, even in your grocery store, it could very well just not be lobster. And this is not saying that these replacement products that are the creature that's said to be the lobster, it's not saying that that's bad. It's just that's not what you're paying for. You're paying for a premium product and you're being sold something far less than that. P.S. If you are going to try to eat good quality seafood, make sure that the soy sauce that you're using, if you are using soy sauce, is gluten-free. It's very unlikely that it's going to be gluten-free at your average sushi joint or anything like that, so bring your own with you or ask. Even the cheapest buffets in America tend to have gluten-free soy sauce on hand. Nowadays, you just have to ask for it. So I guess one of the main problems here that I do have with the fishing industries and the fish selling industries and other seafood product selling industries, including the restaurants, right? So from boat to restaurant, there's problem. Our focus is on a cheap product, right? We're demanding a cheap product, but meanwhile, this is a premium product. This is part of nature's bounty. This is some of the most nutritious, diverse, and good tasting and diverse tasting spectrums of foods that we have on Earth. This is the seafood range, and again, sea moss, seaweed, everything up the food chain has some super high nutritional value for us that we can utilize and that we should utilize. The problem is we have not put that premium price on what we're willing to do to have safe, clean farming industries and non-destructive, non-wasteful fishing practices. These things could totally be changed, but right now the situation really is so dismal that I don't want to participate in it. And this is not to say that I'll never eat seafood, and in fact, if Wayne comes over and brings us a trout from up here in the northern lakes, we're quite close to the Arctic watershed. These are quite high quality fish in my opinion, and of course there's pretty much a 0% bycatch if you actually just go out with one hook, catch one fish and bring it home. Everything above that, long line, all the commercial fishing methods are going to have very, very high rates of bycatch. That is a concern for me. Again, it can be reduced if we do utilize a lot of those products, if we don't send them over to waste. By the way, one of the other major problems in Asia, because a lot of the bycatch problem, this has to do, some of the big players to blame are big giant ships from the Netherlands and Belgium and Norway, countries that we might not necessarily suspect, but they're going out with massive fishing trawlers, and there's a huge amount of bycatch coming from there. But in Asia, one of the major problems is that on the smaller fishing fleets, they go out with a boat full of nets and they come in with a boat full of fish, meaning they leave the nets out there. This is a massive problem. Again, this is an economic problem. They can't afford to bring the nets back and the fish back to make their venture profitable because of the low market prices demanded of them and our low scrutiny of the actual market and where these fish are coming from and what's happening to them before they get to our plate. We really haven't taken a deep look at this, and these ghost nets, as they float around the ocean, obviously they're accumulating. Most people know about the plastic islands, and that's a problem, but people don't really know how big of a problem the ghost nets are. And as a diver, that can be one of the nightmares, that you never ever want to encounter a ghost net, because they seem to pretty much just swallow up everything in their path and continue on. It's just a floating island of death, and it's really a terrible thing, and it's just something that we need to be aware of, right? None of this is condemning the industry completely. It's just saying that there are things that we do need to change before I'm going to be willing to put my money down and pay for seafood included in my regular diet. So I appreciate you guys watching this video, and I hope it made you more aware and look a little bit closer the next time you go out for sushi, or the next time that somebody suggests that you buy fish in your grocery store. Look at it really closely, see where it came from, and really decide if you want to eat it or if your money is better spent on some other source of food. Thanks, guys.
These shrimp kebabs, shrimp Creole,
pan fried, deep fried, stir fried.
There's shrimp soup, shrimp stew, shrimp salad, shrimp and potatoes, shrimp burger, shrimp sandwich. That's about it.